I'm not the kind of man who starts fights. In fact, for most of my life, I've survived by staying quiet, doing my job, and not giving anyone a reason to point fingers. But the day my boss handed my company car to his new assistant, smiling like he was offering her a birthday present, I realized something terrifying. Quiet men only stay quiet until someone steals the one thing they've actually earned. For me, that moment felt like a crack in my ribs. Not pain, pressure, the kind you feel before something snaps. I've worked for that company for 7 years. Never late, never sloppy, never a problem. I handled field visits no one else wanted, drove across cities to deliver documents at 7 p.m., showed up at construction sites on Saturdays because client relations apparently included being everyone's errand runner. The company car wasn't a perk, it was a tool. My tool. My way to move fast, solve issues, bring value. It wasn't fancy. A mid-range sedan, slightly scratched door, coffee stain on the passenger mat from a supplier who bumped my elbow last year. But it was mine through usage, through responsibility, through every hour I'd spent keeping this company running while the executives played golf. 2 weeks before everything collapsed, I started noticing the assistant, Emily, hovering near the car keys. She'd joined the company 3 months earlier. 24, bright smile, loud heels. The kind of person bosses call a great energy. No clear role yet, but always near my boss, always helping with things that somehow never involved actual work. One morning she asked casually, "Hey, could I borrow the car? I need to pick up something for Mark." Mark, my boss? The man who didn't know the difference between a client meeting and a brunch reservation. I hesitated. She noticed. "It's just a quick trip," she added, flashing that you won't say no right smile. I handed over the keys because saying no felt complicated. She came back 2 hours later with a shopping bag from a boutique and iced coffee in her hand. She didn't even pretend it was work-related. That was the first tremor. The second came 3 days later. I found the gas tank nearly empty and a parking ticket shoved under the visor. I brought it to my boss. He didn't look up from his screen. "Handle it, will you?" "I didn't get the ticket," I said carefully. He waved a hand. "You're the car's primary user. It's your responsibility." Something in me twisted. Primary user, responsibility, not ownership, not respect. That Friday morning, I walked into the office expecting another routine day. I'd barely put my bag down when Emily walked past holding the keys. Me keys. Twirling them around her finger like a joke from a sitcom. "Big day?" she said. I frowned. "What do you mean?" Mark stepped out of his office with a grin that didn't fit his face. "Oh, didn't she tell you?" he said. "The car's hers now." I thought he was joking. Truly. My brain refused to process it. "Excuse me?" I asked. He crossed his arms, enjoying the moment far too much. New policy. She'll be handling most of the off-site tasks, brand meetings, event pickups, all that creative stuff. She needs mobility. You can manage your visits with your own vehicle. Submit for reimbursement. Reimbursement. The same reimbursement he rejected every single month because expenses didn't fit the budget. I tried to steady my breath. "Mark, I rely on that car to meet deadlines. Clients expect—" He cut me off with a lazy shrug. "Then adjust. Emily's the priority now." Priority. That word hit harder than the announcement itself. Emily chimed in softly, almost apologetic, but not really. "It'll really help me, though." I looked at her. She couldn't meet my eyes. "Is this temporary?" I asked, searching for sense where there was none. "No," Mark said. "It's permanent. Hand over anything you still have. Parking pass, gas card, maintenance log." He held out his palm. I didn't move. Not out of rebellion, out of shock. Because at that moment, I understood he wasn't just taking a car. He was taking dignity, rewriting the hierarchy in a way that placed me beneath someone who'd been here a quarter year. When I finally dropped the items into his hand, he gave a satisfied nod. "One more thing," he added. "Try to be mature about this. Last thing we need is tension. Tension, as if I was the problem. I walked out of his office in a fog. Emily bounced the keys lightly against her palm, already smiling down at her phone, probably texting someone about her upgrade. I sat at my desk, staring at my monitor, seeing none of the words on it. My thoughts were loud, disjointed, impossible to control. For the first time in 7 years, I didn't feel like part of the company. I felt replaceable, disposable. Like furniture someone swaps out because a newer model appeared. But something else happened too. Quiet, small, sharp. A thought I couldn't unthink. If he could take away something essential that easily, what else had he taken without me noticing? That was the moment the crack inside me deepened. But it was just the beginning. The first week without the car felt like being demoted without the title change. On Monday, I took my own old hatchback to the far side of town for a client walkthrough. The AC wheezed, the engine made a sound I didn't like, and halfway there I realized I was paying for gas to do the same job I'd done for years, on the company's dime. When I came back, the sedan was parked in Mark's spot. Emily was leaning against the hood, laughing into her phone, sunglasses on, one heel pressed against the bumper, like she was posing for a catalog. There were shopping bags in the back seat that I knew did not have our logo on them. She caught my eye and straightened up. "Hey," she said like we were friends. "How was the visit?" "Fine," I answered. "Do you have the mileage log?" She blinked. "The what?" "The mileage log," I repeated. "For the car. It's part of the fleet record. It has to be filled out." "Oh." She looked at the dashboard like the book might materialize there. "I've just been using it. Mark didn't say anything about that." Of course he didn't. I went upstairs, pulled the mileage sheet from the fleet folder, and saw her scrawl. 2 entries in a week, both labeled client. No names, no addresses, just client. The ticket I'd mentioned earlier wasn't recorded anywhere. I sent Mark a polite email. "Hey Mark, quick note. We need to make sure mileage and usage of the sedan are logged accurately for the fleet records and reimbursement. Can you clarify who's responsible for that now?" He replied 3 minutes later. "Grant, focus on your own deliverables. I'll handle my team." My team." I sat back in my chair, jaw tight. Irritation wasn't even the right word. It felt like having my face slapped slowly with paperwork. By Wednesday, the situation got worse. I filed my first reimbursement request for using my own car. Gas, tolls, parking. I attached receipts, highlighted client names, even added a polite note explaining the change in transportation. Friday afternoon, finance replied, "Hi, Grant. Your request has been declined. As per policy, employees using personal vehicles must have prior written approval. There is no such record on file. Best, Carol." I read it twice, then 3 times. Prior written approval. I still had the email from 6 months ago where Mark had asked me to start using my own car when the company car was in service. I dug through my archives, found it. "Can you just take your own car this week? We'll sort the mileage later." Later never came. Apparently, it never existed on paper. I went to his office, knocked once, and stepped inside. He didn't look up. "Got a minute?" I asked. "Make it quick," he said, scrolling through something on his screen. "Finance declined my reimbursement. They said I need prior written approval to use my own car." "Well, there you go," he said. "You don't have it." "I have your email from March," he shrugged. "That's informal. Policy's the policy. You know that." "So when you asked me to use my car, that was—" "What?" A suggestion I was free to ignore. "It was a request made in good faith," he said, finally glancing up. "You've always been a team player. Don't turn into one of those guys who nickel and dimes the company over gas money." It wasn't just gas money, and he knew it. "I've been covering work trips out of pocket for months," I said quietly. "Now you've reassigned the company car, and I'm still expected to travel. How exactly does that work?" "You're paid well," he said. "This is a growth phase. Everyone sacrifices a bit. Emily is helping with high visibility stuff. You can manage the groundwork. That's your lane." "My lane." I felt something in my chest go very, very still. I just want what's in my contract, I said. Tools to do my job, or reimbursement if I provide my own. He smiled then, a small condescending curve of the mouth. Grant, you signed that contract 7 years ago. Things change. If you don't like the direction, nobody's forcing you to stay. There it was. The unspoken turned into a weapon. I walked out before I said something I'd regret. But as I sat back down at my desk, my mind wasn't foggy anymore. It was sharp. I pulled out my contract from my email archives, read it line by line. There it was, the clause about company-provided vehicle or equivalent transportation allowance for all field staff. No addendum, no revision, nothing I had signed to give it up. I printed it and slid it into a folder. That night, at home, I dropped the folder on my kitchen table. It landed with a soft thud, but to me it sounded heavier. I flipped through not just the contract, but old emails, calendar invites, notes. Times I'd stayed until 9, just this once. Weekends I'd driven an hour and a half each way because no one else is available. The unpaid overtime that never showed up on my pay stub. There was a pattern, one I'd been too tired and too loyal to name. My phone buzzed, a message from Emily in the group chat, a photo of the car at some rooftop event, lights reflecting off the hood. Perks of the job, Mark replied with a flame emoji. I didn't comment. I was busy backing up my emails to a personal drive. A quiet man can stay quiet a long time, but once he starts documenting, the silence has a different purpose. The next day, during lunch, I called a number I'd saved months ago and never used. A friend of mine, Ray, had given it to me after a barbecue where I'd complained about workload 1 beer too deep. If you ever feel like they're taking advantage of you, talk to my cousin, he'd said. Employment lawyer, knows his stuff. At the time, I'd laughed it off. Now I scrolled to the contact and hit call. Office of Daniel Kerr, a receptionist answered. Hi, I said, hearing my own voice sound stranger than usual. My name is Grant. I think my employer might be violating parts of my contract. I'd like to schedule a consultation. We set it for the following Tuesday after work. I almost canceled 3 times. Who was I to drag a lawyer into this? Was I being dramatic? Was this just how things were now? Then on Monday, an email landed in my inbox from Mark. Team, with the restructuring of roles, we're streamlining responsibilities. Effective immediately, Grant will handle more internal tasks and fewer external visits. Emily will be the main point of contact for client-facing activities requiring travel. Attached was a revised role summary that made my position sound like a glorified clerk. No mention of the car. No mention of allowances. Just less visibility and more busy work. I read it twice, 3 times. So he wasn't just taking the car. He was shrinking me. I replied, Hi, Mark. Can we discuss this change? This isn't what we talked about when I was hired, and I'd like clarity on how this aligns with my contract. He didn't respond that day, or the next morning. By the time I walked into Daniel Kerr's office Tuesday evening, my irritation had settled into something colder. Not rage, calculation. Daniel was in his late 30s, neat suit, no tie, the kind of calm that makes other people confess things. He listened while I explained the situation from the beginning. The car, the borrowing, the ticket, the reassignment, the reimbursements, the new role summary. I slid my contract and printed emails across his desk. He read in silence for a long minute, then another. Okay, he said finally, tapping the contract with his pen. This is already messy, but let me ask you something simple first. He looked up. Has your boss ever put any of these changes in a formal amendment? Anything you signed? No, I said. Everything's been casual, verbal, or in vague emails like that last one. He nodded slowly. Good, he said. Then he's built his house on sand. I exhaled a little faster than I meant to. That's, good? I asked. He smirked faintly. For you, potentially very good. For him, not so much. You're not just dealing with a stolen car, Grant. You're dealing with a pattern of unilateral changes without consent. unpaid business travel, and what looks like retaliation dressed up as restructuring. I felt my heartbeat in my throat. So what do I do? First, he said, sliding the papers into a neat stack, you keep doing your job. No outbursts, no emails you'll regret. Second, you keep documenting. Every denied reimbursement, every vague new task, every time Emily uses what the company legally committed to provide you. He paused. And third, he added, his voice going just a shade colder, you let me send a letter. Not aggressive, just precise. We'll see how your boss reacts when someone who understands the contract reads it back to him. For the first time since this started, I felt something break through the frustration, a thin, quiet sense of relief. Not victory, not yet. Just the realization that I wasn't crazy, and I wasn't alone in this anymore. I stood up, shook his hand, and thanked him. On the way out of his office, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from Mark. Grant, regarding your concerns about your role in transportation, everything is fully compliant with company policy. If you have an issue, we can revisit your future here. Daniel glanced at the screen over my shoulder. Forward that to me, he said. That sentence alone is interesting. I forwarded it before I even reached the elevator. At the time, I thought we were still talking about a car and a few unpaid gas receipts. I had no idea that was just the first thing my lawyer noticed. Daniel didn't drag his feet. By Thursday morning, he'd sent the letter, 3 calm paragraphs citing specific sections of my contract, state labor regulations, and a request for clarification on unilateral reassignment of essential work equipment. No accusations, no threats. Pure precision. He CC'd me. 2 hours later, the ripple began. First, an unexpected email from HR. Hi, Grant. We received a communication from your counsel. We'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss your concerns. Please provide availability. Concerns? I stared at the word. No one had ever cared about my concerns before. Not once in 7 years. At noon, Emily breezed past my desk holding a smoothie and humming, but her expression shifted when she saw the folder, labeled legal, sitting near my keyboard. She slowed down. Everything okay? She asked lightly. Everything's being reviewed, I said. She blinked, smiled too fast, walked away. That was the first sign they felt the shift. Around 3, Mark finally emerged from his office. He walked past me as if I didn't exist, but his jaw was clenched, and his phone was pressed so hard against his ear his knuckles were white. He shut the glass door behind him and lowered his voice. HR glanced at him through their window. Something in the air changed, a storm without thunder. That night, Daniel called me. Expect friction, he said. Your boss will try to intimidate you, or minimize things. Don't react. Let them show their hand. He didn't need to tell me twice. The next morning, Mark cornered me by the kitchenette. No greeting, no smile. What the hell is this? He asked, waving his phone, the email from Daniel glaring back at him. Clarification, I said evenly, just like it states. You went to a lawyer over a car? I went to a lawyer because you're violating my contract. His lips twisted. You're making a mistake. HR works for the company, Grant, not for you. They're not going to take your side. I'm not asking for sides, I said. I'm asking for compliance. Something flickered in his eyes, frustration mixed with something like fear. He leaned closer. If you're trying to play hardball, you should know the company has been reorganizing. Positions aren't guaranteed. You keep pushing like this and things might change fast. I didn't flinch. He noticed and hated it. I've documented everything, I said quietly. So if anything changes, we'll have a record of the timing. He froze for half a second. Then he walked away without another word. That single moment was the first crack in his confidence. But chaos was just getting started. HR scheduled the meeting for Tuesday. Over the weekend, I prepared, printed emails, screenshots, the contract, reimbursement denials, time-stamped conversations. All neat, all verifiable. Monday morning, I found the company car parked crooked in the loading zone. Emily climbed out, holding 2 shopping bags, one clearly from a luxury brand. She walked inside, humming. My phone buzzed with a calendar update. Tuesday's client visit reassigned to Emily. Mark, he was moving pieces fast now. I walked into his office doorway. Why was the visit reassigned? I asked. He didn't look up. You're focusing on internal tasks, as outlined. My contract says otherwise. He slammed his pen down. For God's sake, Grant, stop hiding behind your contract. You're being inflexible. I didn't reply. I just turned and left. That silence bothered him more than any argument could. That afternoon, something strange happened. Finance emailed me. Grant, can you clarify why you submitted reimbursements for mileage in March and April? I responded. Mark instructed me to use my personal car when the company vehicle was unavailable. Attached is his email. 5 minutes later, another email. We found inconsistencies in vehicle use logs associated with the sedan. We may require additional information. Inconsistencies. Emily hadn't kept any logs. None. She'd been using the car as if it were hers. And suddenly that mattered. The next day, HR called Mark into a separate meeting before mine. He walked in confident. He walked out pale. He didn't even try to hide the way his hand shook when he poured himself water in the kitchenette afterward. When I walked past, he avoided my eyes. The shift was real now. At 2 o'clock, I stepped into HR. 3 people sat at the table. The HR manager, a compliance officer, someone from corporate legal I'd never seen before. A laptop was open. A stack of printed emails lay beside it. Grant, HR began, we'd like to understand the situation from your perspective. I explained everything, chronologically, calmly, without embellishment. I laid out the documents. I showed the contract clause. I showed the emails where reimbursements were denied, the revised role summary, the Your Future Here message. They listened. They didn't interrupt. When I finished, the compliance officer tapped a document. We've reviewed the vehicle records, he said. According to company policy, the car cannot be reassigned without written employee consent or a formal amendment. I nodded. I never signed anything. He clicked his pen. We noticed. The corporate lawyer leaned forward. Grant, is it correct that you were required to drive for work while lacking the company-provided transportation promised in your contract? Yes. And that your reimbursements were denied despite written requests? Yes. He exchanged a slow look with the others. There was a tension in the room, not against me, but around me, like they were circling something bigger than my complaint. Then the compliance officer asked, Do you have any reason to believe the assistant has been performing unlogged client-facing activities or personal errands with the company vehicle? I paused. I have reason to believe most of her trips were personal. He wrote that down. When I left the meeting, my hands were steady for the first time since this started. Mark called me into his office 20 minutes later. He shut the door, lowered his voice. What exactly did you tell them? The truth. His face reddened. You think you're untouchable now? You think HR is your ally? I stared at him. I think my contract is. He opened his mouth to fire back, but his phone buzzed. He glanced down. The color drained from his face. He didn't finish his sentence. He just told me I could go. I went back to my desk, trying to focus, but the silence felt electric. At 4:41 p.m., I received an email, a short one, from corporate legal. Grant, thank you for your cooperation. We will follow up soon with next steps after our internal review. Next steps. I didn't know what that meant yet, but the office did. People whispered. Emily didn't hum anymore. Mark stayed in his office, blinds half closed, pacing. That night, Daniel called me again. How did HR go? They asked a lot. I answered everything. Good, he said. And one more thing, Grant. His tone shifted, slower, deliberate. They just sent me something their legal team forwarded. It's interesting. What is it? A discrepancy, he said, and not a small one. My pulse kicked. What kind of discrepancy? Daniel exhaled softly, the kind that makes a company very nervous, and a boss even more. He didn't say more. He didn't have to. Because in that moment, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. They thought they'd taken my car. They had no idea what I was taking back, and something important had just gone very, very wrong for them. The next 48 hours moved like a tide, pulling everything loose from the ocean floor. On Wednesday morning, Mark arrived later than usual. Normally, he strutted through the office like he owned the walls. That day, he slipped in quietly, eyes down, sleeves slightly wrinkled. Emily trailed behind him, her smile thin, fingers tapping nervously against her phone screen. A few people exchanged glances. The air had weight now. Around 10, HR sent out a company-wide notification. Mandatory compliance review for select personnel. Scheduled individually. Please check your calendar invites. I checked mine. No invite. Mark had 2. Emily had 1. Something in my shoulders loosened. Not triumph, not yet. Just the recognition that the ground under my feet was finally level. At noon, while I ate at my desk, Daniel called. They found the discrepancy, he said, and it's serious. What is it? They audited the usage logs for the company car. Emily logged 39 client visits that never existed. 39? Not just missing information, fabricated entries. My fork paused midair. Fabricated? Yes. And guess what else? A handful of those dates overlap with events where she tagged herself on social media, which means non-business use of a corporate asset recorded as client work. That's policy violation and potential misuse of funds. I let that sink in. And Mark? I asked. Daniel's voice cooled slightly. He approved every mileage submission without review, which means either negligence or complicity. My heartbeat steadied into something slow and controlled, not excitement, closure preparing itself. Grant, he added, this is bigger than your contract now. They're looking at liability. Later that afternoon, the first meeting began. Through the glass wall of the HR room, I saw Mark sitting rigid in a chair, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles whitened. Across from him were the HR manager, corporate legal, and the compliance officer. Papers were spread across the table. A laptop screen glowed. The door was closed, but even from outside, you could feel the tone. Clipped questions, concise answers, no room to spin or charm. Emily waited outside in a chair, staring at her shoes, twisting a bracelet around her wrist over and over. She looked younger than usual, smaller. When Mark finally stepped out, almost an hour later, he didn't look at anyone. He walked straight to his office, shut the door, and pulled the blinds all the way down. Emily was called in next. She bit her lip, stood, and walked inside. For 30 minutes, the office was silent. Phones rang softer. People typed slower. A strange collective stillness settled over the floor. Then Emily emerged, pale as paper. Her eyes were red. She left the office without picking up her bag, just kept walking until she disappeared toward the elevators. Her bag sat there until someone from HR retrieved it. At 4:12 p.m., I received a new email. Grant, thank you for your cooperation throughout this process. Based on our review, we acknowledge that your contractual transportation rights were not upheld. Effective immediately, the company vehicle assigned to you will be reinstated. Additionally, we are issuing a retroactive reimbursement for all business mileage. We appreciate your professionalism. Corporate legal attached, a PDF summary, each compensation line carefully calculated. Amount more than I expected, more than I ever would have asked for. 5 minutes later, HR followed up. Grant, we would also like to discuss your job duties moving forward. Please join us tomorrow to outline the role as originally defined in your contract. HR. My role, my contract, my boundaries, restored. I sat back in my chair and exhaled slowly. It wasn't adrenaline, it wasn't victory. It was unburdening, like someone had lifted a weight I didn't realize I'd been carrying for years. The sun had started to set when HR called Mark in one last time. No one saw what happened inside that room, but when he walked out 20 minutes later, he carried a box. Not a big one, just enough space for a few personal items, a framed photo, and a coffee mug. He didn't look at me as he passed. He didn't look at anyone. He walked straight to the exit, shoulders stiff, muttering something into his phone that sounded like denial, wearing a thin coat of panic. HR escorted him out. The door closed. Silence followed. Emily came back later, eyes still red, to collect what remained on her desk. She didn't meet anyone's eyes either. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't even log out of her computer. She just took her things and left quietly, like someone stepping backward out of a room they were never supposed to be in. No drama, no scenes, just consequences. The next morning, when I stepped outside, the company car was parked in my spot again, clean, fueled, waiting. The keys were already on my desk when I arrived. Attached was a simple note, as per contract. HR. I picked up the keys, felt the familiar weight in my hand, and realized something. This wasn't about the car. It never had been. It was about the moment I stopped letting other people shrink me. At noon, I met with HR and corporate legal. They outlined my restored responsibilities, clarified the contract, offered additional protections, and asked if I had any further concerns. I didn't. I left the office early that day. They insisted, said I'd more than cooperated. I walked across the parking lot, the late afternoon sunlight warm on my shoulders, and unlocked the car. The engine hummed the same way it used to. Familiar, reliable. On the drive home, the air felt clearer than it had in months. Not triumphant, just right. At a red light, my phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize. I let it go. Then another buzz, a voicemail. I didn't play it. Whatever it was, apology, explanation, panic, it wasn't mine to carry anymore. When I pulled into my driveway, I turned off the engine and sat there quietly for a moment, resting my hands on the steering wheel, not thinking about the past, not thinking about revenge, just breathing. Because the truth is simple. Some people think they can take everything from you because you've never pushed back. But calm doesn't mean weak, quiet doesn't mean blind, and patience doesn't mean permission. My lawyer didn't destroy anyone. He simply held up the contract they'd signed and ignored. They destroyed themselves. I stepped out of the car, closed the door gently, and walked toward my house. Lighter, steadier, and finally, fully done with every moment that had led me to this one. The story didn't end with a shout. It ended with clarity. And that was enough.